Hello, and it's Mindfulness on Monday, and I promised you a mindful movement opportunity, and so here it is. This is some time for you to get together with yourself or maybe somebody else, and so to really start to inhabit this sensation of movement. And so movement has lots of connotations, getting fit, a movement for aesthetic reasons. And I've done it for all of those reasons over the years. But increasingly, I come upon the idea that movement is supposed to make us feel better, not worse. And so moving mindfully is really an opportunity to explore how our body experiences the things that we do, and also to then maybe start to bring that into the movements that we embed into our day. And so that might be going for a walk, it might be doing the cleaning or cooking a meal, it might be running a bath, who knows. But really to take that time to be with yourself and really notice. And so this is something that's born out of my practice as a Pilates teacher over many years, and as a relatively newly qualified yoga teacher. And so these influences, both mind, body, movement practices, and both very similar and yet subtly different at the same time. Joseph Pilates took a lot of his influences from yoga and other things that he studied. And so the things common to both, the breath and some of the movements, a lot of the movements actually are common to both. But the thing that is less embedded within Pilates is this, the meditation piece. That's not to say that we're not mindful when we do it, because we are. We're absolutely paying attention to the sensations as we go about the movements, and so that's that's really an opportunity to, one, make sure you don't hurt yourself, two, to be interested and notice a sensation. And maybe you could think about a sensation. Is it stiffness, say, for instance? Is it a sensation of stretch? Is it a sensation of muscles working, maybe getting into the shaky territory? And just to notice that for what it is, an experience, without having to judge, anything to do with that. Particularly experiences that nudge towards the boundaries of our capabilities, and sometimes can trigger pain receptors to do their part. And so pain, is an experience which, like lots of things, is actually a range. It's if we think of a range, we call it in physiotherapy on a scale of 0 to 10. If 0 is nothing and 10 is the worst. So it is a range, and so it's navigating this range in an area of, is that acceptable? What is acceptable? And so a sensation that takes you somewhere into that range is not necessarily harmful. And actually, when we start to nudge the boundaries of our body's capabilities, that's when we start to experience shift. And that's why we do it, to generate a change, either a change in the strength that we have, or the flexibility that we have, or how well we're able to balance on one leg, how well we're able to go about our lives and our hobbies that we have. And so to be able to explore that range of sensations with curiosity, rather than a sense of fear or dread, is something that I think is really important for us to be able to do. So let's start with the breath. It begins with the breath in Pilates. It begins with the breath in yoga. So I'm going to come and sit in a comfortable seat, and I invite you to join me if you have a few moments. And what is really quite important is for us to think about the breathing apparatus being stacked, so that the pelvis, the rib cage, and the head and neck are all stacked in a vertical alignment. And for lots of people, that means relying on some kind of a raise. And you know, this is entirely appropriate if it means that you then are able to sit or adopt a much more upright posture. And of course, if sitting on the ground is prohibitive, then you know, feel free to sit on a chair. And so bringing the focus, quietening the mind into a place of quietness and stillness and peace and calm prior to embarking on our mindful movement session is the purpose of the breath, really. And so it's just about allowing the breath to flow in and out of the body, noticing the areas of the body where expansion occurs as you inhale, and then as you exhale, notice where the recoil occurs. And then maybe attempt to direct the breath to fill the rib cage. And, you know, when we cue breathing, this means lots of different things to lots of different people. And so currently I'm really enjoying my book, Breath by James Nestor, that I'm reading. And so much work has been done around the breath and the physiology of breath and the effects on the body, the nervous system, etc. And so what I am becoming increasingly aware of is that what we want is a slow, full breath into the lungs, filling the rib cage with air, and ideally breathing in and out through the nostrils. And so prolonging that cycle of breath. And it may be that you can count to 4 as you do this. Perhaps it's 5 as you inhale. And that's going to be different for everybody. And then similarly exhaling in this instance, we'll choose to exhale for the same length so that the breath is equal in duration as you inhale and as you exhale. And so counting in your own mind is another way of bringing the focus away from the outside, away from the distractions in the room, any sounds or sensations of maybe you've got a draft from an open window or something. And so just breathe in your own time, knowing that all is well with the breath, however you happen to breathe. And so as we go through some movements, I'd like you to get a sense of incorporating the breath into the movements. And at no time do we hold the breath. The breath is flowing a little bit like a pendulum would swing in and then out of the body, ideally through the nostrils, in equal measure as you inhale and as you exhale. And if you are going to prolong any phase of the breath, I would recommend prolonging the exhale, just very slightly. So that breath in and out of the body. And then beginning to move. And we'll start with some gentle nose circles. Imagining you've got a pencil poking out of the point of your nose and you are drawing a small circle on the wall ahead of you. And really, when I'm not in danger of falling over and we are noticing how the body's responding to what we're doing by closing the eyes, by removing one of those inputs, sensory inputs, then we come to rely more strongly on the other sensory inputs. And so we can dive a little more deeply into the sensations of how that feels when you move. And of course, it's really important that movement should feel like it's doing you good. And if ever you encounter something that doesn't feel like it's doing you good, then you have my permission not to do it, okay? So change direction. And again, you might start small and grow a little larger as we go about this. And so just, what do you notice? Lots of people tell me about the snap, crackle, pop sensation in the neck. And, and again, the rhythm section in the body just gets a little bit more prevalent with the passage of time. And for me, I just let the rhythm section drum along in the background as I carry on moving regardless. And in the absence of sharp pain, then I would recommend you do the same. Come back to the center, and I'm going to rotate my head, looking over the shoulder. I think it's really important that we give the body the opportunity to be put through the whole available range of motion at every joint, at least once in a day. And so what you find, or what you might notice, is stretching sensations in the neck. The other thing to remind you, of course, that being vertical as you do this is really important. So you don't want to feel like you're in a slumped posture at all. Growing the top of the head tall to the ceiling, a sense of elongation and creating spaciousness between the vertebrae as we move. And explore this movement with curiosity. And what you might notice as you repeat the movements is it starts to feel a little freer. So synovial fluid in the joints will become more, less viscous, actually is what I should say, as you move. And so it's more lubricating, and thus, we start to feel like we could maybe move a little further should we need to. And so exploring the edge of the movement, just getting curious about the edge. And then I'm tipping my ear to the shoulder. And, this is a movement, side flexion. This is a movement that does decrease with the passage of time. Side flexion in the neck, side flexion in the lumbar spine. They get less as we become more advanced. So, just be mindful of that. And then dropping the chin towards the chest and very gently tilting the ear towards the shoulder, keeping the chin gently nodding towards the chest. And so this brings the focus a little bit more into the back of the neck, and just notice any sensations. You might inhale as you go one way, exhale as you go the other way, and just approach your body with curiosity and non-judgment. Easier said than done. And then return to the center. I'm bringing my fingertips onto my shoulders and starting to circle at the shoulders. Again, we can start smaller and then progress the movements and get a little bit bigger as we go through the range, as the joints begin to warm up and loosen. And so for this time, all we need to think about is breath and movement. And again, closing the eyes does allow us to occupy that space inside the body just a little more readily. Notice any sensations. Now reverse it and we go the other way. Very good. So a common area of tightness, stiffness, discomfort is wrists, especially for ladies. When we come to do load-bearing exercises, often the wrists are the thing that prohibit people from joining in, and painful wrists is very common. Again, you know, that sensation of pain, is it think of it, that scale, you know, and we might go as far as 5 out of 10 without any risk of injury. I suppose the thing is that scale is open to interpretation, and what is 5 to somebody might be 10 to somebody else. So I say that with some reservation. Now, backs of the hands. So I'm fortunate. I've been blessed with 2 things. Long arms is one, and flexible wrists is the other. And I don't quite know who I have to thank for that, but it's definitely a fact. So I don't have that sensation of discomfort when I bear load through the wrist. But if you were to, this is something that you can work on. And actually, I'm going to just approach the camera as I show you this wrist stretch, because this is one that I really like. Holding onto the finger, drawing the finger in towards you, and make sure that the arm is straight, outstretched, and the wrist is in extension up towards you. And then drawing the finger in, and you can see that's, you know, really quite flexible on me. I was a pianist in my youth, played for 10 years, had lessons for 10 years to be in 18. So maybe this has something to do with it, I don't know. Drawing the fingers in. So I'm on the 4th finger, drawing that finger in towards me, and then the little finger. And all the while, the wrist is in extension and the fingers are spreading. So I'm not letting the rest of my hand be relaxed, spreading. Extension at the wrist, extending the fingers. And you can do all 4 fingers at once as well, is another version. Maybe when you've done them individually, you could have a go at doing them all together. And the thumb, taking the thumb and clasping, that's it, in towards me. No, that's not it. It's quite funny, isn't it, how you can't remember. Anyway, drawing the thumb in and back, also stretching off the carpometacarpal joint, capsule of the carpometacarpal joint, and a common source of osteoarthritis. And these capsular stretches can really, be beneficial in guarding against the reduced function, reduced range and reduced function that comes from osteoarthritic changes. So putting the joints through their full range of motion once in a day. There we go, I've remembered now, pulling it in towards you, is totally to be recommended. Very good. So returning to the support, and then reaching the arm up over. So bending at the waist. Again, this is side flexion, isn't it? So we know that. So this can get a little bit stiffer with the passage of time, and so that sense of noticing the bottom bones straight down into the ground. The bones that, if you sit on a hard wooden chair for any length of time, you notice those bones in the bottom on the chair. So we keep those bones nice and still as we go about this bending at the waist. So we've done a really nice job of preparing the wrists to wait there. And I think that's often the thing that goes awry, is that we expect the wrists to just be able to come into these kinds of positions without preparing them. You might think of stretching your leg muscles, warming up your legs before you go running. Well, it's the same for the wrists. And another nice thing to do for wrists is to draw these circles. So the back of me is relatively neutral, not rounded or hollowed. And then I'm just allowing these circles at the wrists, circles at the hip joints and the knees. Of course, knees, kneeling for lots of people can be uncomfortable, and so you can roll your mat. I've actually got two here underneath me, especially on the wooden floor. You need plenty of padding for kneeling particularly. And then coming to the center, one of our favorites, cat. And so if we were to close the eyes and just experiment with moving from just one end at once. So I'm going to begin moving from the tail end and then finish moving with the head, rounding from the tail end up through the spine, segmental movement, and then from the tail end through the thoracic, lumbar thoracic, neck and head last of all, tail end, so that you can really dive deep into how you move. So not just a question of whether you move or not, but this how do we move? And this ability to connect, isolate movements, and then we integrate the movements into normal function subsequently as we go about our lives, rounding like an angry witch's cat and then sinking into this hollow shape. And so round about now, the wrists start to say, I think I might have had enough. And so I'm coming just to kneel with the hands one over each other in the small of the back, opening the front of the chest. So here I'm thinking of a sense of lifting and opening the breastbone, opening the collarbones, but at the same time sending my tailbone down to the back of my knees. So this line of tension through the front of the knees, the thighs, to the head. And actually you could do this movement and just keep the eyes looking ahead of you if putting the head back causes any issues for the neck at all, because this is another very common scenario that taking the head back becomes more challenging with the passage of time, in part due to stiffness, but also weakness of the deep stabilizing muscles that's situate in the front of the neck. Stretching the seat to the feet. This is child's pose in yoga and backrest in Pilates. So common to both. A lot of these movements common to both. And then slowly uncurl and come into this lunge position. Again, lunge position, challenging for lots of people. The key points are around the knee and the ankle in the front of you, lifting and opening the chest, the collarbones, reaching the arm if you feel so inclined. You could still support yourself, but all the while a sense of sending the tailbone down towards the back of the knee as you lift and reach and lengthen. And then you could hold the position, or we can sometimes incorporate a little bit more oscillation, which allows us to move in coordination with breath, Inhale. Lengthen, reach, exhale. Chest towards the thighs. Inhale. Reach and lengthen, exhale. And swap sides. Same thing on the other side. You wouldn't want to neglect one side now, would you? So tailbone to the ground. That sense of a torch shining light to the back of the knee. Float, reach, lengthen. Fingertips, from the fingertips all the way down to this knee. And then we can oscillate. Fingertips touch. Breastbone shines ahead of you. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. So these big full body movements, harnessing the myofascial connections, multi-dimensional movements. And very good. Okay, well, let's come to sit and tackle the hips just a little bit. Another common source of stiffness. Again, the raise can be very beneficial at this point, just to give you an advantage. And you know, lots and lots of people that I encounter have great trouble with doing this, and so having the feet further away from you is one way of tackling it. And definitely the raise. That is, and you know, for some people we need a good couple of inches to get them up high enough to allow for these movements to happen. And then we can just sit with the breath for a moment, allow gravity to take effect, and for shift to occur. And sometimes we just need to hold movements for that to occur. Very nice. Okay, so let's finish off with something that we call frog's legs. And this is really quite a nice one. It can be a bit of a challenge to get your head around. But before you do it, if you touch to your toes and just notice how that feels in the backs of the legs. Probably a bit tight. If you haven't done it yet already today. And so frog's legs. You're getting my best side here. So start with the knees out, feet out, and then slide the heels away from you. Turn the toes in, knees in, and bring the heels up along the edges of the mat. So you can see that I'm more or less tracing the edges of the mat, which actually wants to join in, doesn't it, today, the mat? It wants to join in. So this internal rotation at the hips to the external rotation and the fluid movement is really sculpting into the hip joints. And hips, if we had to just work on a few areas, hips and shoulders for my money, necks and backs. So you do this for a few minutes, and this is something you can do quite comfortably in front of the television of an evening, just for 5 minutes at a time. And when you first begin, you might notice your hip joints are trying to tell you something, And then as you continue, actually the messages might just abate very slightly. And as the fluid, the lubricating synovial fluid begins to become less viscous and lubricates the joint. So having done that for a few minutes, reaching to touch the toes. And there's very few people who don't find that it feels easier after doing that. So a whistle-stop tour, a break in the middle of your day to experience some mindful movement. I hope that hit the spot. Do let me know and take care. Have a fabulous rest of your day. Bye for now.